All right, you've brought in a fascinating collection of excerpts here, teachings and stories, all attributed to Agathiya, the Tamil sage. We even have one dated just last week, so talk about timely.
Quite a mix of spiritual wisdom you've gathered, indeed.
It's like we have a direct line to this mystical figure. So for those of us who might need a little introduction, who exactly is Agathiya in the Tamil tradition?
He's a revered figure, often considered a siddhar, which means he's attained extraordinary spiritual heights. Imagine a master of yoga, a scholar, and a guide to spiritual liberation all in one. Agathiya's wisdom has been passed down for generations, really shaped Tamil literature and thought.
And these excerpts you've shared, it seems like he's covered a lot. We've got teachings, pronouncements, even what feels like almost like a travelogue as he moves around. But one thing that really jumps out at me is this emphasis on charity, especially during the Tamil month of Puratasi, which, by the way, we're nearing the end of right now.
It's no coincidence.
Yeah.
Puratasi is really significant for devotees of Vishnu. The whole month is dedicated to him, and acts of giving during this time. They're believed to be particularly auspicious. It's a time for spiritual reflection, renewal, and lending a helping hand to those in need.
Okay, so we have this connection, charity, Puratasi, and Vishnu. But Agathiya doesn't seem to be talking about just blindly throwing money around, right?
Absolutely not. What's interesting here is Agathiya's focus on the intention behind the giving. He stresses genuine compassion, true selflessness. Especially, he seems to be saying, in the context of dharma.
Which brings us to another key theme that runs through these texts. Dharma, right? Conduct, ethical living, all that. But Agathiya's excerpts also reveal how complicated it can get when, well, humans are involved, right?
Precisely. Agathiya doesn't shy away from the complexities of human nature, even, or maybe especially, when it comes to devotion. He shows how people can misunderstand true devotion. Sometimes they mistake rituals for genuine connection. And, well, sometimes they're even worse than that. Sometimes they just fake it all together.
And we see this tension, this back and forth between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. It plays out in one particularly intriguing story, the one where Vishnu himself gets a taste of his own medicine, you could say.
Ah, yes, that story. It's a classic. It highlights the importance of genuine devotion and the dangers of complacency, even for gods.
It's almost like Agathiya is setting up a test. And not just for Vishnu, but for everyone who encounters this story.
And that's what makes these teachings so compelling. He challenges us to really examine our beliefs, our actions. He's pushing us to go beyond just the rituals and embrace the true essence of spiritual living.
So we've got this foundation of charity, dharma, and, well, the very human struggle to embody both of those things. But then there's this story you mentioned, the one where Vishnu gets schooled, I guess you could say. Tell us more about that. What leads these two powerful figures to hit the road disguised as beggars?
Well, it all begins with Agathiya calling out Vishnu. Vishnu's being a little too free with his blessings, you see. He's granting wishes left and right without really considering if the recipient is worthy. And, well, Agathiya is not too pleased about this.
So it's like a divine intervention. But this time it's Agathiya stepping in to course correct. And what better way to do it than by going undercover? Especially during Puratasi, this month of giving.
Exactly. It's a brilliant storytelling device, really. By taking on these disguises, becoming beggars, they get to witness firsthand how people are really living out these principles of dharma and charity, especially those who've already received Vishnu's blessings.
This sounds good. It's almost like Undercover Boss, Divine Edition, but with, karmic consequences.
It's a very apt comparison. And what they encounter on this journey, well, it reveals a fascinating spectrum of human nature.
Now, I'm dying to know how this whole undercover operation unfolds. What kind of reception do they get, going door to door as beggars? Do people even recognize them? Let's find out in part 2 of this deep dive. All right, we're back. Last we left off, Vishnu and Agathiya were about to embark on this undercover mission, as beggars, putting human generosity to the test, especially with Puratasi in full swing. I'm guessing things get interesting.
Oh, most definitely. And remember, they're not just observing random people here, are they?
Yeah.
They're seeking out those who've already received blessings from Vishnu. It's a chance to see if these gifts have led to genuine gratitude or, well, if a sense of entitlement has set in.
Okay, so they start going door to door. What's the general reaction? Are people, welcoming?
Well, that's where the intrigue really unfolds. You'd think those touched by divine favor would be, shall we say, a bit more charitable, right? But instead of open arms and open hearts, they're met with indifference, even outright hostility in some cases.
So even though these people have received blessings, they've kind of forgotten the source of their good fortune. It's like, I don't know, winning the lottery and then complaining about the taxes.
It's a classic case of spiritual amnesia. They're so blinded by their perceived good fortune, their material possessions, they completely fail to recognize the divine presence standing right there in front of them.
Their blessings have actually become a barrier, haven't they? It's like they've missed the whole point of receiving something so special.
That's a really sharp observation. Agathiar is highlighting this danger of complacency, this confusing material prosperity with spiritual growth. He's showing us how easy it is to become attached to the gifts themselves and totally forget about the giver and the deeper purpose behind them.
And it's not just about material wealth, right? There are these hints of like hypocrisy in the story, this disconnect between their outward displays of piety and, well, their inner state.
Exactly. Agathiar doesn't let them off easy. He portrays these individuals as, going through the motions of religious practice, all the rituals, the offerings, but their hearts aren't in it. They've mistaken these outward actions for genuine devotion.
It makes you wonder if this is how they're treating Vishnu and Agathiar in disguise. How are they treating those who are truly in need?
That's the implicit critique woven throughout this whole story, isn't it? Agathiar is challenging us to look beyond these superficial acts of piety, these outward shows. He wants us to ask ourselves, are we embodying the true spirit of compassion and generosity in our daily lives? Are we walking the walk, not just talking the talk?
Which brings us to this turning point in the story, the introduction of the disabled devotee. Here's someone who has been totally marginalized by society, and yet his faith is unshaken. Tell us more about this encounter.
This is where the narrative takes a really powerful turn. So we have this individual, right, living in poverty, facing social exclusion, the whole 9 yards. And yet he welcomes Vishnu and Agathiar with open arms. He offers them the little food that he has, insists they stay at his humble dwelling, even goes so far as to declare it as their own.
It's such a stark contrast to those wealthy individuals who just like totally brush them off, you know?
Huh.
This man, he has so little, and yet he embodies the true spirit of generosity.
And it's his unwavering faith, his pure heart, that truly resonates with Vishnu and Agathiar. It's like his lack of material wealth has created space for something far more valuable, this genuine devotion, this selflessness.
It's like the universe was watching this whole time, and this man's actions, they just spoke volumes. But the
Yeah.
story doesn't end there, does it? There's this mysterious feast that happens.
Ah, yes, the feast. This is where things get even more interesting. The devotee, he's so grateful. He insists on preparing this huge feast for them the very next day, which, by the way, happens to be a Saturday during Puratasi. So he goes all around town, invites everyone he can find to partake in this big celebration.
And I bet those who dismissed him before, thought he was just some beggar, were suddenly singing a different tune. Like everyone wants to be his best friend now that there's free food involved.
You can imagine. But, true to form, they dismiss him again. They assume he's lost his mind. They can't fathom why he would invite them after they've shown him nothing but scorn.
So what happens? Does the feast just go to waste? I'm hoping there's a satisfying twist here.
Oh, there most definitely is. As the devotee sits down to this feast, surrounded by empty seats, a remarkable thing happens. The house is suddenly filled with all these unseen guests, rishis, munis, all these celestial beings, and they're all partaking in the meal.
It's like this, I don't know, divine intervention, right? A reward for his unwavering faith, his generosity. Who are these rishis and munis, though?
Think of them as wise, sages, celestial beings who exist on this higher spiritual plane. Their presence signifies divine approval of the devotee's actions. It's a testament to the fact that true generosity never goes unnoticed. Even when it seems like no one is watching, the universe is always watching.
I love that. It's like the universe threw him the most epic dinner party, like, ever. But it gets even better, right? His life changes pretty drastically after this.
Absolutely. It's like this act of faith and generosity. It just unlocked a wave of blessings. He's cured of his disability. He suddenly gains the recognition and respect from all of those people who shunned him before. He even goes on to establish a grand dining hall where he continues to serve those in need.
It's a beautiful example of how one act of genuine devotion can just ripple outward, right? Transforming not just our own lives, but the lives of others as well. But I have a feeling there's even more to unpack here. What does this story tell us about Agathiar's teachings as a whole? We'll dive deeper into that right after a short break. Stay with us.
It's one thing to hear about charity and dharma and all that, but this story really brings it all to life. you know,
It does, doesn't it?
to see how even Vishnu gets put to the test by Agathiya. I don't know, it makes you wonder if we're all being, like, observed a lot more closely than we realize. That's the beauty of these teachings, isn't it? They would really make you think about your own life, your own motivations.
Yeah.
Would we have responded with that same open heart, like the disabled devotee?
I'd like to think so, but then again, you hear about those people, the ones who just brush them off even after they'd been blessed. Makes you wonder how much of our generosity is really just, wanting to look good.
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. Agathiya is pointing out this very human tendency, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's reminding us that real generosity has nothing to do with recognition or reward. It's about aligning yourself with Dharma, acting with compassion no matter who's watching.
Which brings us back to that idea of the test, right? Agathiya says he helps those with genuine hearts. But how can we really know if our heart's in the right place? Or is that just part of the mystery of it all, this constant effort to embody those virtues?
Well, what I find interesting is that Agathiya doesn't give us any easy answers. There's no checklist for spiritual purity or anything.
Right.
Instead, he gives us these stories, these situations that force us to look inward, examine our motivations. It's a call to continuous self-reflection, to always strive for alignment, between our actions and our deepest values.
It's like he's saying the real test isn't this one-time thing, but this, lifelong journey of trying to live a more conscious, compassionate life.
Exactly. And maybe that's where the real reward is. Not in seeking external validation or anything, but in cultivating that inner sense of peace and alignment that comes with living in accordance with Dharma.
It makes you think twice about those little everyday encounters, doesn't it?
It does.
Like offering a genuine smile to someone or stopping to help someone who needs it without expecting anything in return.
Those small acts can be so powerful. They show a commitment to living out these principles in every single moment, not just when it's easy or expected of us.
So much to think about. And honestly, this whole deep dive into Agathiya's teachings has been, really eye-opening. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface here, but we've still managed to uncover some real gems of wisdom.
That's the great thing about these traditions. They just have endless layers of meaning. Every time you revisit them, you discover something new, something that speaks to, right where you are on your own journey.
And for our listener who took this deep dive with us today, I hope this just sparks a curiosity to learn even more. It's been such a fascinating journey, this exploration into the heart of Tamil spirituality. And who knows what other treasures are out there just waiting to be discovered by those who seek them out.